Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Next to None. I am so excited about this conversation today. Why conflict isn't the problem, miscommunication is. Conflict doesn't usually start where we think it does. It rarely is about the issue on the surface, and it's about people, how people are communicating, reacting, and interpreting each other under pressure. And if you don't understand that, you'll keep addressing the wrong problem. So here's the key idea for this. Conflict is not a sign something is broken. It's actually a signal something is misaligned. And most leaders fall into two traps. The first one is they avoid it. Things go underground. So there's just an avoidance of it. And it's not unusual for different types of leaders or individuals to avoid conflict. The other one is they attack it and things escalate. I used to be that person. I had no problem coming to you, and if I had a problem, I was going to address it with you, get it done with, and move on. However, I didn't always do it in the right way, and we're going to talk about some of those things. So, with the disc, since this is the little series that I'm doing with everyone, it brings in a different lens. And so, under pressure, people become someone don't become someone new. Um, Meaning that, when we come under pressure, something else just kind of shifts in us, but it's something that's there, just sometimes it just lays dormant. And they become a little bit more an intense version of their natural style on the disc, like we talked about, which just for a recap, the D is a dominance, drive results. The I is they love people. They're, just generally very relational. The S personality is steady, they're very calm. And then your C personality is they're conscientious, they're very analytical, very detail driven. So, um, in that state, you become a intense version of your natural style. And that's really where conflict starts to become predictable. So, let's talk about how each of these styles responds to conflict. So the D style, which is dominance, they really move toward conflict. Their behavior under pressure can be direct, forceful, and become very controlling. They're focused on solving things very quickly. How they are typically perceived is they're aggressive and impatient, and I can say that that was me. I was that person at one point in time. I've learned and grown quite a bit. What they need directness, they need clear outcomes, and they need efficiency. They don't want to sit and talk about it forever. They just want to get to the point and keep moving on. So, how do you work with someone that is a D style in conflict? Well, the first thing is you got to be concise. If you're over explaining something, they've already tuned you out and moved on to the next thing. Get to the point quickly. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. If I was approaching a D personality, I would say, hey, we had a conversation yesterday, and this is what I thought the outcome was. Somewhere there is a disconnect. So, can you help me understand what you meant yesterday? And maybe I just misunderstood, or maybe it wasn't your intention to say what you said. That's quick, to the point, and all those things. And then the last one is don't over explain. If you over explain, you lose them. And then we come to the I style. Often they deflect, and redirect. Behaviors under pressure, they may avoid tension. They use humor or conversation to diffuse. And I think we've all had that one person, like when they mess up and you go and you have that conflict with them, and they're just like, oh, ha ha ha, and just make jokes about it. And that's not uncommon. So how are they perceived? A lot of times they're perceived as not taking things seriously, and then they're also perceived as being inconsistent. That doesn't mean that that's what they actually are. It's just a perception because of the way that they handle conflict. So what do they need? They need a positive tone. They need relational connection. So if I were approaching a I personality in some type of conflict, I would just start with, "Hey, how are you doing today? Something happened yesterday, and I know this wasn't what you meant, and so I just wanted to ask you about this so that you can maybe help me understand. Do you think that you can help me with that?" 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be like, yes. The other piece goes along with this is they want the space to talk it out. They want to talk about it. So how do you work with them? You keep tone constructive. You're not overly critical If you start being overly critical, the next thing's going to happen. They're going to shut down. And we don't want to shut them down. We want to process through that conflict. And then the last one is bring them back to the issue clearly. Sometimes it gets off because they have reasons why they were that way during that day or whatever that might look like. Bring them back to what the issue is and then ask them how you can help them. Or, maybe they just are like, you know what, I own that and I'm so sorry. And you can move forward. And then you have the S style. They're steady. So they withdraw or make accommodations. So uh, behaviors under pressure can look like they avoid conflict. They don't even want to have the conversation with you. You might set up a meeting. They might not show up. All those things. They give in just to keep the peace. They may be highly offended, but they may not want to have that conflict. So they carry that with them and they just give in. Okay, yeah, I was wrong. Thank you. And we don't want that either. How are they perceived? They're perceived as passive and unclear. That's not always the case. They're actually some of the most brilliant people because they're very thoughtful in some of the things that they do and what they see. And so being able to have that conflict with them is really important. We don't want an S to become passive and unclear. So what they need safety. So I personally had an assistant that was an S, and I really had to work hard at making them feel like they could tell me their feelings without there being any recourse or something that happens out of that. The other thing that they need time to process. Not everyone processes quickly. I personally am an external processor. Some people are internal processors. And finding those safe places to do that is important. And then the last thing that they need is reassurance. They need reassurance that, hey, we had this conflict, but we're good. Making sure that they know that you're still for them, you still think great of them, and so on. So how do you work with them? Slow the conversation down. Ask for their perspective directly and create a safe environment to speak. And I had to do that. We had a meeting once a week and I said, hey, what are the things that I did last week that bothered you or that I missed? And they would share with me. And I was very thankful for that because otherwise I just don't know. You're not always conscious of that. And then the last style for this is the C style. And they are analyzers and they analyze and they question things. So behavior under pressure for them focuses on details. They may challenge logic. They're not, remember, like D personalities, I personalities sometimes are like, hey, I just feel in my gut that this is right. That's never going to work for them. They may challenge the logic of that. Even though it's gut, it's still not logic for them. How they're perceived, critical and rigid, sometimes they just can't get on board. And what do they need? And this is hard for most of the other personality styles. They need data, they need accuracy, and they need time to process. And as I shared in a previous one, sometimes it's okay to let a C process. Sometimes as a leader, if you're leading a C personality, giving them that opportunity just to sit back and process the information and then come back and ask questions because that's important to them. So how to work with them? Be prepared, stick to facts, and avoid emotional arguments. They really struggle with the emotional arguments. Here's where conflicts break down between these styles. Conflict's really not about a personality. It's about how two different styles experience pressure at the same time. So a D versus a I. A D gets straight to the point where an I wants connection and conversation. The result is that the I personality feels dismissed and the D personality feels like they're being slowed down. The D versus the S, the D pushes and the S shuts down. So the result is frustration on both sides. There's no win there. And then your D versus your C, the D personality wants speed. They want speed. And then the C personality wants accuracy. What's the result? Conflict over pace and standards. The I versus the D. The I shares the story. The D wants the bottom line. The results of that, the D gets impatient and the I feels unheard. The I and the S, I moves fast and with high energy. S's prefer steady and calm. The result ends up being S's feel overwhelmed and I personalities feel held back. And then you have the I and the C. The I talks very broadly. The C personality wants specifics. And what is the result? Misinterpretation and tension. And then let's move on to the S personality. The S and the D, the S waits and accommodates, and the D takes control. The results are the S feels overlooked and the D feels unsupported. And then the S versus the S stays steady. The I brings energy and change. The results are disconnect in pace and engagement. The S and the C personality, the S focuses on people, the C focuses on process. And the results are that S feels the tension of that while the C sees the inefficiency. And then the C versus the D. The C analyzes, the D pushes forward. The tension is between those is caution and action. And the C versus the I is C is precise, the I is expressive. The result is the C sees lack of focus and the I feels rejected. I'm sorry, not rejected, restricted. And then the C versus the C focuses on logic and the S avoids tension. The results are issues go unaddressed. They'll just avoid it altogether. And those are just some little tips. And that doesn't mean that everybody is exactly like that, but those are things to watch out for when you're, connecting in the workplace with the different personality styles. So there's a 4-step conflict reset that we're going to talk about. The first one is pause your reaction. Don't match intensity with intensity. If somebody comes to you, I had someone that I worked with and he was very aggressive. He was a high D personality and he would barge in my office and bark at me and tell me all the things that he doesn't like that I've done or this, that, and the other. And my initial reaction when I started working with this person was slow your roll, buddy. You're not going to talk to me that way. Then realizing more about his personality, I finally just would say, hey, you know what? Let me think about that and I'll get back to you. Because I knew because he was a D personality, that intensity was going to stay in that as long as his mindset was in that intensity. The second thing is identify their style. What's driving their response? Is it results? Is it people? Is it stability? Or is it accuracy? Because that will help you figure out how to respond to that particular conversation. The third thing is adjust your approach, change your tone, your pace, and your level of detail. With that particular situation I was talking about, I had to take a pause and then I approached them. It was the next day. I let it sit because I was pretty hot in how they came and approached me. So the next day I went in and I talked to them. I was like, hey, listen, I understand that you're very frustrated about this. Can you tell me what exactly the details are that you're looking at that has frustrated you? And how can we move forward with this? And we were able to do that and it was fine. But sometimes you have to adjust your approach depending on the personality tendencies of that individual. And then the last part of that framework is clarify the outcome. What are we solving and what does the resolution look like? Which is key. So how do we apply this in terms of the organization and who you're leading, maybe your team or maybe your business, whatever that is? Conflict avoided becomes culture. If you allow conflict in your organization to continue, that becomes your culture. And then your culture becomes toxic and unhealthy. Conflict mishandled becomes division. What that means is exactly that. When you mishandle conflict, you don't get both sides or you don't have that conversation where you're trying to seek to understand with one another. It's going to cause division. And those individuals will probably always have some struggles in working together. Conflict handled well builds trust. And any culture, no matter what size the organization, trust is so important to build. So conflict is not a bad thing. Misalignment is. And when you can't When you avoid or mishandle conflict, that is where the misalignment comes into place. So, how can you adjust how you communicate in your next conversation instead of repeating the same approach? That's not always an easy thing. It took me a really long time to adjust how I approach conflict. And one of the greatest things that I learned is by asking questions. How did I make you feel? I'm so sorry that you felt that way. What do you think I can do better next time? This actually puts you in a very vulnerable position. However, it's also the sign of a great leader because you're asking for feedback, which is one of the things that we will probably talk about in this next episode. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I can't wait until next time. If you're running your business alone, making every decision alone, this is for you. The Boardroom is a private, virtual peer advisory group for women in business. Every month, I bring you together for a fully facilitated experience. Expert learning, honest strategy, and real conversations that move your business forward. A guided space where your challenges get real answers from women who get it. I'm Amy K. Nunn, and I'm the lead strategist of the Boardroom. I built this because the right room changes everything. Applications are now open and spots are limited. Find your seat at the table.